Ash Hansen, thank you for joining us. Brian Garish, thank you for being with us today. We greatly appreciate it. Jack Cox, thank you, Jack. Bethany, so nice to have you join us. Thank you very much. Blanca, thank you. Len Fong. Hi, Len. Thanks for joining us. Terry Fontenot, thank you for being with us. Hi, Wendy York. Thanks for joining us today. And Wendy Austin. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to give it one more, about 30 seconds more, and we'll get started. Cheryl, thanks for being with us. Hi, Chris. Well, welcome and good afternoon to the Leadership in the Age of Personalization live stream. Whether you're joining us from Zoom or YouTube, we're live. I'm Glenn Yopes, and on behalf of GLLG, thank you for taking the time this afternoon to join me as we all interview Annette Walker, known as the Solutions Architect, who also serves as the president of City of Hope, Orange County. Our topic today, women in leadership. Annette will also be a featured speaker at the 2020 Leadership in the Age of Personalization Virtual Summit on October 28th through the 30th. You can learn more about the summit at 2020summit.ageofpersonalization.com. You know, the best women leaders I know have what I call circular vision, that ability to see beyond, beneath, and around what they seek. Their broadened observation really allows them to be enablers of opportunity because they are compassionate, empathetic, and they seem to always have their finger on the pulse. See, they know how to pivot and course correct, maximize resources, and keep things focused on the things that really matter. Now, I've seen women run the show for years, both in my home and in the workplace, which has truly enabled me to recognize behavior patterns and see the value behind their way of doing things. I'm an advocate for women. In fact, I believe that women are master multitaskers and are highly collaborative. They enjoy their own space to test themselves and find their own rhythm. See, these women leaders are like scientists. Many of them want to make new discoveries or solve problems where others have failed. The women leaders I've been around don't stop pursuing until they get the work done. The women leaders I know invest themselves and become knowledge seekers. See, they're not afraid to ask questions when given a safe platform to express themselves. Though extremely curious, it's often balanced with a bit of healthy skepticism to ensure they aren't being blindsided. You know, as I've learned from my own women bosses and mentors, they want things to be authentic and practical. And one thing is certain, these women leaders have grit, and they're not afraid to fight for what they believe in or an opportunity to achieve something of significance. Today's session is a Q&A session. In other words, the Q&A won't happen at the end, but rather throughout the program. We have GLLG staff on standby. Submit your questions through the Q&A module on the Zoom control panel. GLLG staff will organize the flow of questions to ensure that you can address your thoughts on an open mic. Now, before I welcome Annette, I'd like for you all to watch the following short video from Annette's opening remarks at the 2019 Leadership in the Age of Personalization Summit.
Clearly here, we're trying to talk about creating a wave of something special. And that something special is personalization. Now, being committed to making your employee's journey as personalized as the individuals will pay enormous dividends. You know, I've seen it in my own career. I've seen it in healthcare. When we treat employees as individuals, when we invite them to bring their whole self to work, we acknowledge their dignity that each person deserves. And that butterfly effect is enormous. So how should we lead in the age of personalization? John West Burnham said it this way: it would be wrong to see leadership and management as opposite sides of the spectrum. And in fact, they have a very symbiotic relationship. The introduction of personalization requires coupling leadership qualities with highly effective and efficient management practices. So as we begin to work today, I want to ask you to think about how much we as leaders allow individuals to help influence and define our business. So as a leader, what do I want to do? What do I want the people who lead with me to do? Well, we need leaders who inspire. We need leaders who will welcome ideas different than their own. We are the ones that translate principle into practice. We need to be reflective, we need to be flexible, and we need to encourage diversity of people and thought and be rabidly inclusive. We need to extend ourselves to try new and individual ways of approaching work, and I'll even go so far to say is we need to love the people we lead.
Annette Walker, it is a pleasure and honor to have you on our live stream today. Thank you, Annette.
Thank you, Glenn. It's great to spend some time with you and all the people who are on the Zoom call today.
Well, thank you, Annette. You know, you have to love who you lead.
Yeah.
Annette, I have to tell you that you were ahead of your time when you made that declaration. You know, as you well know, Annette, we need this level of compassion and empathy in leadership more than ever before.
Agree.
Annette, when did you come to the realization that leadership requires us to respect and to know the individual on a deeper level?
You know, actually, I think it was something I think I always knew, but I don't think I ever heard it articulated until I worked for a group of Catholic nuns. And the foundations of a Catholic ministry are that every individual being made in the likeness of God has merit and dignity on their own. And that extends to every aspect of the workplace. You know, we always hear, I mean, I know that's not news to you to hear that quote and to know that, but to extend it into the workplace in such a way, for example, if you're going to make a change in the workplace, ask the people affected. That's giving them dignity. That's giving them some control. That's giving them influence, and that God placed in them. And so I think that was the first place that it hit me in a different way. And then it hit me a little bit more on the whole meaning of life and leadership is like, why do we choose to do the things we do? We're actually choosing to do these things, or I think a lot of people are, to make a world a better place. So if you get something done, but you didn't make the world a better place, or you didn't make people realize what their full potential is, you probably didn't do a very good job as a leader. So that's probably, I think, where it's really took its hold in me.
Well, I'm glad it did, because the impact that you have, not only in your current role as president of City of Hope, Orange County, but the impact that you've had in the healthcare industry has been tremendous. And, you know, let's face it, everyone that's joining us today, they have a cloud of uncertainty that's moving all around them. And, you know, I think a lot of people are wondering, you know, can we really change? I mean, clearly personalization has hit us about as strong as it can, but yet the forces of standardization get in the way. So, so I believe, and I'm an optimist, that the mechanics are there for us to change. And if somebody were to question them, the one simple answer would be the people. We have a lot of people to listen to and learn from. But my issue and question for you, Annette, is that I'm not so sure of the motivation. And you may think, well, gosh, Glenn, why aren't people motivated to change? Well, we've had our time to change, and we should have been motivated to change. And we've turned enterprise into this massive arena of transformation, and now we've been dealt with two major crises. So, can we be motivated? I mean, and does this mean do you think we have the willingness and the capacity? Because you've understood this for a long time. So what message can you deliver to us with respect to the motivations, and whether we're not willing to do it, why do we have to?
I have to give that a little thought, because I think there's two things going on here. One is that we are in a situation where I think many people feel right now they have less control. And certainly on this, whether it's in your community or society, all of a sudden we got a whole bunch of new rules. We can't do things we used to do. We changed our work environments, and people feel like there's a lot of things out of control, out of their own control. But I remember going to a presentation once, and this was early in my career, and I heard this gentleman say, the worst thing you can do is to use your boss as an excuse for not doing what you can. And I sat back and thought, that's pretty profound. And it's one of the true statements that I think I've ever heard in my career. There are many people around us sometimes who don't abide by whatever your philosophy is or the way you want to do things. And there's certain times there's rules you have to follow that are above you. But there's so much that actually is in your control, that you could always control the way you respond. You could always control the way you treat people. You could always control how much you listen. So I guess if people feel that personalization is a key, and I hope a lot of the people on the line today do feel that it's a key, and its success of going from good to great. I think Jim Collins would have put it in his book if he was rewriting it today, that it is a key to success. Never use what other people are doing for an excuse. You have immense control over yourself.
So it's interesting. This comes to someone just chatted and sent a question through the chat box, and I'm going to relay it to you, Annette, because I think it's appropriate for what you're talking about. And so let's say that, and I'm kind of framing it for Wendy. And Wendy, thank you so much for the question. So when you're dealt these circumstances where you don't believe in what's happening, or just because other people are moving, why can't we take the initiative? She says, under what circumstances, if ever, do you allow your emotions to show in a business setting? Especially one that you may not believe in.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think in our careers, women in particular have been like, we have this little, we're emotional. And so we're very, I think, have been groomed to be more reserved. But I want to tell you that in this recent COVID thing, I was talking to a group of women, and one of the most common things that came out in being a very good thing of the COVID experience was showing our own vulnerability to the people we lead, as well as being willing to listen to theirs.
Yeah.
That it's a two-way street. But if you want them to share their concerns and their worries or their vulnerabilities, share yours. And the amount of goodwill that came through because of that. There was one woman who was speaking that she had shared her immigrant experience. For some reason during COVID, this topic came up, and she had shared her immigrant experience and the challenges that she and her parents had. And then all these employees who she was not aware had similar experience. All of a sudden, what it did in their group, it was like, oh my gosh, we have so much more in common than we knew. But often it's the being vulnerable that allows you to open that door for people to know you differently. But it starts with you being that way also.
No question. So how have you implemented? So first of all, thank you for responding to Wendy's question, Annette. But so on that note, how have you implemented personalization in the workplace, and what has been the reaction from your team? And are some more open to it than others?
I think people grow accustomed to it. We didn't sit there and go, all right, from now on, we're going to be respecting personalization in the workplace. It wasn't like a situation where one of our employees was very ill, one of the first people in Orange County to almost die from COVID. And we went through it as a team. And during that time, we were doing personalization before that, and we cared about many of the parameters of personalization, but that event put it on steroids where every individual had to be all in on this. We had to worry about what everybody was concerned about. Were they concerned about getting sick? Did they need help? What's the situation with your kids? What's your circumstances for getting your work done? Even if there wasn't COVID going on, you're working from home. What do you need? How are you feeling about that? Do you feel like you're productive? What are your thoughts about how often we should talk as a group? And when we do talk as a group, what do you want to talk about? I mean, people also wanted to talk about other things. Sometimes they wanted to talk about how they were spiritually, and sometimes they wanted to talk about what was the funniest thing they ever did on vacation. And I know some of this goes, oh, what do you people at City of Hope do? Do you just play around and talk all day? No, this was a very structured process that facilitated those moments. And wow, they will be with us forever. I think we'll be keeping a similar framework for the serious moments, the work, get it done, but also the other moments of how do we create the stickiness in our workplace and between each other. People don't work for organizations, they work for people.
Yeah.
They work for each other.
Yeah, and well, thank you, Annette. And I've often wondered, why did it take a pandemic for people to finally figure that out? I mean, let's face it, you've been able to create a culture of empathy and compassion to where people on your team feel comfortable speaking up. While in many organizations, regardless of industry, there's this level of standardization that makes people feel uneasy rather than confident about the environment to speak up. So on that note, I have a couple questions here for you, Annette. And one of them we're going to put on. In fact, I'll start with, it's an anonymous attendee. And this individual says, do you have recommendations around how to manage up if your manager micromanages details, which leaves a feeling of reduced empowerment and then a lack of desire to create?
Thank you, Anonymous, for a very difficult question.
Well,
that's a hard one. But I have to go back and say again, don't let what someone else is doing prevent you from what you think you should be doing. Every leader wants to achieve the goals, whatever the goals are. And I think if I were in that situation, the way I would manage up is I would begin to make some suggestions to my leader about, do you think we could just try this? Because I think the group would really respond to this. I think this would help us accelerate our goals. I think this would provide more clarity to the group. I think this would improve the teamwork. Sometimes you're going to have to use words from the standardization world, but couch them in a personalized delivery.
Agreed. Well, I'll add to what you just said, Annette, is that we oftentimes find ourselves battling the gulf between assimilation and authenticity. We feel at times more accountable for what others want us to be rather than what we seek to be ourselves. And the message is don't let other people define you. And
Yes.
I think that's what you're saying. I think it's a great point. So we've got the questions are rolling in, Annette. So you're creating some inspiration here. So this is someone we both know. So Jack, thanks for joining us. I'd love for you to get on the open mic and ask Annette your question, please.
Hey, Glenn. Hi, Annette. You're looking good on camera there, Annette.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to see your name and hear your voice, Jack.
Thank you. One of the challenges I think that we have is because of the standardization that we have in our organizations around how we develop leaders, we don't take into account our differences and how best to develop individuals as leaders. And I was wondering, Annette, especially from your background and experience, what advice would you give to executives who want to do a better job at developing their women leaders, especially when you take it through the lens of personalization?
Well, I think every leader should have a different plan. And I'm not saying that some of these corporate programs aren't good, because they do often provide a lot of value on, I'd say, how to do certain things well. But when it comes to developing an individual, Jack, I think it's really needs to be a focused and personalized plan for that individual. So I may say, hey, Jack, I want you to learn how to do this type of financial analysis. And that may serve the needs of the organization. But the question, on the other hand, with that to be, Jack, what would you like to learn? What is something that if a year from now we were to assess your performance, you would say, I'm so glad I had the opportunity to learn this. These are my long-term goals. And as your leader, I would feel responsible to help make sure that happened. Whether it's getting another degree, or whether it's a particular skill, or whether it's getting you in front of a particular audience, you deserve, Jack, as an employee or someone I'm responsible for, to have a plan of development that I'm going to help you with. And I hope my boss would do that for me. And I hope, Jack, you would do it for all of your people. Sometimes organizations are fortunate enough to have people like you, Jack, come in and assist with that, because Jack does some career advising. But even amongst that, I think Jack could tell you, those are very personalized plan. It is not a one size fits all and says, oh, as long as we run through this curriculum, you're going to be a great leader in a year. That's not how it happens. It has to be personally tailored to an individual. And someone said to me something yesterday about one of our vice presidents, and it made me feel great. She said, Larry reads my stuff and will tell me, why is it better that you say it like this and that? And she goes, he's the first one that actually will sit me down, and now I'm understanding and growing. And what I said to her, I said, I'm so excited to hear that Larry said that. And I love Larry, and I'm not surprised Larry would do that. But I said to her, you should be able to expect that from anybody you work for. Yeah. So if they don't give it, ask for it. Ask for that specific direction and personalized growth plan.
That's excellent, Annette. And, this all boils down to, do you see me? Do you know me? Let me put it another way. We may have an individual that has 20 years of marketing experience as an executive. I'm sorry to say that today's world may not lend to that 20 years of experience. In Absolutely. Fact, you may have somebody in the sales group that is now your marketer. The point is that we need to get to know the people that we lead so that we can pivot and prepare people based upon the unique needs of the business. And this is where I think development from a personalized standpoint fails, because we keep trying to standardize what people should be rather than getting to know what their individual capacities are so that they can align, again, with the specific needs of the business. So, Annette, we have another question for you. Okay. This one is from Steve, and he sent this through chat. Good question. One of the biggest barriers to effective leadership is the lack of self-confidence and self-esteem. Some find themselves in positions of leadership and feel like they have nothing to offer to others. Any input?
Yeah, that if you've accepted the mantle of leadership, somebody recognized in you that you have something to offer others. And so it's more about finding your soul in your heart. You know, one of my favorite heroes, and people who have heard me speak before might have heard me mention Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was 14 years old. She couldn't read or write. She came from the middle of nowhere, and she got an army of men to follow her. And I always think when I'm sitting there going, no, do I got the chops to do this? Am I strong enough? I think of Joan of Arc. There's even days when I know I'm going to have a tough day. I have these socks that have her image on them. And I put my Joan of Arc socks on and say, it's a Joan day. I'm going to go do it. So I would encourage you to, if that is a situation you think you might find yourself in, is to take some encouragement that somebody picked you because they saw something in you, and continue to develop that. And if you want to do it, be brave enough to just take it. What is the worst that can happen? A major disaster being way bigger than it actually is. People are very forgiving, and you won't do everything right. But if you look at someone's career, if you look at my career, I like sometimes to use this picture I have of an iceberg. And when people see me right now, they see the top of the iceberg, and it's like, oh, it looks like, oh, she's like a top executive, and this must be been so great. Her career was easy, and she just did this, this, and this. What they don't see is what's below the water. And below the water are those moments for me. Below the water is when I was discouraged. Below the water was a job I didn't get that I wanted. Below the water was going back to school to learn things I needed to know, or finding a sponsor who helped me find the way. So when you look at other leaders around you, hey, they put their pants on one leg at a time. Just like you and me, don't worry so much about what you don't have, and go with what you do have. Take a shot.
I love that, Annette. In fact, someone, Maddie, said, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing this. We could all learn from adversity, and leadership is born in challenging times. Thank you, Maddie, for sharing that. So, Annette, you've been named, or in fact, last year you were named as one of the 100 most influential people in U.S. healthcare. This goes back to the iceberg. From the face of it, it seems as if you already know how to lead and inspire others. However, I suspect your leadership style continues to evolve. How has it changed just in the last 6 months, let alone the last 5 years? I mean, how do you keep yourself open for growth?
Well, I'll say it comment on the long term. I've always loved to learn, so I'm always been trying to learn how to be better, and I read a lot. And my most recent book, I listen to podcasts a lot too, because I think there's always so many things to learn. But my recent book I was going to share with you guys is called Daily Stoic, and I wanted to read something I thought was super pertinent for today, but is a lesson about continually learning and seeking out ways of discovering things about yourself and other people that help you be a better leader. So we're in a time right now that things are challenging for us to get done. I've got all this pressure on me right now. I got to start construction on my cancer center. I'm going to start building the hospital. So there's things. My day is not like every day is like a greased wheel and, oh, it's so nice I can sit back. Got hard things to do every day. But anyway, this quote I thought was one of the best things that I've read in a while. And it said, the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with choices I can actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to the uncontrollable elements, but within myself, to the choices that are my own. And then it goes on to say, if a flight is delayed because of weather, no amount of yelling At the airline representative will end the storm. No amount of wishing will make you taller or shorter or born in a different country. No matter how hard you try, you can't make someone like you. If we can focus on making clear what parts of our day are within our control and what parts are not, we will not only be happier, but we will have a distinct advantage over other people who fail to realize that they're fighting an unwinnable battle. So I thought that was like so much wisdom of, really focusing on the elements in your control. But it's just an example, Glenn, I think of, if you want to be better, sharpen the saw. It's not, great leaders aren't born out of accident. I mean, sometimes there are certain personality potentials that make you a great speaker or a great inspirer, but that doesn't necessarily compel people to follow you.
Yeah, this takes me back. This reminds me of how without strategy, change is merely substitution, not evolution. I mean, you could let the environment control you and you'll be practicing substitutional thinking with this imagination of that you're doing so much when all you're doing is following rules that you feel pressured to implement, rather than, like you said, sharpen the saw and begin to discover the capabilities that lie within us. And I think that what you read is so appropriate, especially for what's happening today.
Agreed.
I mean, there's a lot of people that are realizing a few things. Number one, that some of their leaders maybe shouldn't be leading anymore. They're realizing those that are the real leaders that may not have the title. And yet people are starting to realize that the same things that they were concerned about, everybody's concerned about. And oftentimes, while organizations have a propensity of categorizing all of us, we do that to ourselves. And thus we fall in this trap that limits what our potential really is. So if I'm hearing the message right, is that we need to be more self-directed so that we can get to where we need to go rather than wait to be told where we should be headed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that goes back to that first statement I made, that don't let yourself be limited by your boss's vision. And that doesn't mean you don't have a great boss, but I'm just saying, don't use someone else for an excuse of what you can do when you have more control than you think you do.
So Laura said, that's a great quote. Thank you for sharing, Annette. I've learned a lot about only focusing on the things in my control during this different time. In fact, Laura, you're an aspiring leader. I know who you are. In fact, Laura, I'd like for you to open up the mic. Yes, we have to anticipate the unexpected sometimes. So Laura, can you please join us live? We'll give you a couple more seconds, and if you can, please do. And if you can't, just send a chat to Sandy because I'd like for you to go live in the conversation. So Annette, we have another Q&A, and it's from Brian Garish. And I'm going to kind of frame this up for you because this is a big question. In fact, I'm going to have Brian ask you the question. So Brian is the president of Banfield Pet Hospital. So he knows quite a bit about dogs and cats, but he also recognizes how certain populations in the marketplace have really opened our eyes to how we should be evaluating talent and how we should be getting out in front of personalization in the workplace. So Brian, can you please open your mic? I think it's open. And if you don't mind asking Annette your question. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. Hi, Annette. Thanks for your conversation thus far. So there's been a lot of conversation on personalization and just the ways of which leaders lead. But there tends to be this myth of meritocracy in business. And so how do you use data to help shape how you lead your organization to really see and understand your people? So that's the first question. And then the second question, which you can build off of, would be then how do you use data to see and anticipate the needs of the cultural demographic shift that's happening now in the country? So data being at the center of the question, and how do you use it to see and understand the people that you lead? And then how do you use that data to see and understand the people around that's happening with the cultural demographic shift that's happening?
Brian, thank you for asking that question, because I think sometimes people might interpret personalization as everything's a one-off, and I don't think that's true. There's a lot of ways to use data to both develop your people or to cultivate that work environment with your staff, in addition to your population that you're serving. So let's start with the way I would use some of the data with my staff. And actually this happened very recently. We were talking about the staff meeting, and I asked the leaders, I go, how'd you like it? And they all think it was great. I go, what did the staff think? Oh, we think it was great. And it was like, well, how do you know? Did you ask them, or did you survey them? And I think this feedback loop of data can be used for your people, but also data on looking at, what our diversity is, and does diversity match our community? And that goes back to some of the diversity in the community, tallying what kind of different skills that we have within the work area. I've got this person who's really good at numbers. This person is super creative. This person can always be dependent upon for humor. There are all kinds of ways to use data to direct your activities, as opposed to randomly flash in the pan and then using it for feedback. With regard to the community we serve, we use it a lot to both anticipate the needs of our community. We use it to anticipate what the community thinks of us. We use it to anticipate what they thought of our services. We use it to anticipate what they're going to need 10 years from now. When we look at the predictions, as we're in the cancer business, what are the cancer needs going to be in our community, and how do I prepare for them? So your point is really, really great. So thank you for bringing up that should not be interpreted as you're not using really good, sound information to direct your choices. And Glenn, I want to thank you too for saying something about strategy. If I have a love in healthcare, or a love in the discipline of management, it's strategy. Because I think the person who is a strategist is the one who sees the future and positions the organization to thrive in the future, not as much the present. It's about caretaking the future of an organization. And so strategy, data, information, looking at trends, positioning yourself to be successful is extremely important.
Extremely important. And if I can kind of play off of what Brian mentioned, and right now many organizations are in a place right now. And Jack, I think it looks like we're trying to get you on the screen. If you can just click on that button, but we're finding that organizations are really trying to synthesize what they should be placing strategic bets on for the future now, especially when we're in this environment of unpredictability. And so I share that because right now I feel that we're all recreating the strategic playbook. And I think that kind of goes back to, Brian's question. And, the more conversations I'm having with executives, the topic of the day is about data. But instead of just saying data, what we're learning is that there's many forms of data. And those that are on the call right now know that it goes from diagnostic, it goes from predictive, and then it goes to prescriptive. And the more that we can go from diagnostic to prescriptive, we can start feeling as if we could have a better hold of that strategic bet that we play. But to do that, we need to understand our people. It kind of goes back to when you think about strategy, Annette, and I'd love to get your perspective on this. We've been classic, whether it's been in higher education, corporate America, or healthcare, to do a lot of benchmarking. But into this world that we live in, will we resort to benchmark so that we can do what everyone's trying to do, even though we employ and lead different people? Or are we going to stay focused on the people that we lead and those that we should love to lead to take us into the future? What are your thoughts on that, Annette?
Can I answer two questions? So I'm going to go back to one thing Brian said first, because Brian, there's one big thing I left out on the personalization and the data. And Glenn, you alluded to it about the use of data and analytics to provide the ultimate prescription in medicine for the treatment that is the most highly effective for you. And in cancer care, this is particularly important because it has to do with your genetics. It has to do with your tumor's response to a particular drug. It's so complex. So personalization in medicine is becoming extremely important. And I should have mentioned how important that is to our industry. With regard to your question, Glenn, I don't particularly like benchmarks. They serve a purpose, right. But I often think it doesn't inspire the greatest performance. To me, I'm always trying to beat myself. Yeah. Like, can I do better than I did last time? Or can our group do better than we did last time? Because the 80th percentile of a whatever, and you translate it and go, that's not really the 80th percentile, or it's the 80th percentile, but it really means that you were 97th here. People can't even translate some of the scores anymore. But what really matters is, are you getting better? Yeah. Are your people getting happier? Are your patients happier? Are your products more effective? So, well, I know they're important, and for boards and things, they need some outside validation. Performance should be set on beating yourself and being better than you were last year.
I love that, Annette. And I think the message is clear. We need to place a strategic bet on our people.
Yes.
That's the message I took away from that. So let's talk a little bit about a topic that is important to many of our guests today, Annette, and that's board composition. How do we get more women on boards? I mean, look, you understand that this has been the big question for years, but I think one thing that these crises have opened up, in particular in the area of social injustice, that we need to start thinking differently about the composition of our boards. But how do we get dynamic women that are ready to contribute? And does it have to be about their title, or can it be about what they're capable of? Because, we have these particular standards. And again, I encourage our guests to submit a Q&A, but what are your thoughts, Annette?
Well, your question about whether it has to be about a title, there are plenty of super qualified women with and without the title.
Amen. Agreed.
What needs to be changed is they need to be asked. They need to be selected. That's what has to happen. It's like, there's no shortage, Glenn. There's no shortage of people who have the resumes. They've got to be asked, and they've got to be selected. And boards have to make it part of their business to diversify. Yeah. That's got to be on the board agenda. Management can't make the board diversify. Can encourage them to do it, but the boards themselves have to decide to do that.
So, Wendy York, you probably are not surprised that I'm going to ask you to jump in, and then Terry Fontenot, I'm going to ask you to jump in too. So, Wendy, can you please join the conversation live? And if you don't want to, that's okay. Just raise your hand and let me know. Wendy, are you live?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Wendy?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. So Wendy York is the dean of the College of Business at the University, or at Clemson University, Annette. And
hi, Wendy. Nice to meet you.
Hi,
Annette. So if there's one thing I've learned from Wendy, is anything is possible. So Wendy, did you want to provide some perspective and a question for Annette around board compositions, and how do we get more women to be on boards?
Well, Annette's right in that they have to be asked, but this is where I think it's time to crank up the old girl network and compatriot males that are supportive, and we ought to be advocating, and we ought to make sure that we know which of us women have our hands raised and want to be on boards, because the kind of women that are listening to this call are very busy and interactive and know a lot of people and have a lot of opportunities. And so I know they have organizations where you can submit your name and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, but nothing goes as far as someone who knows the group saying, I know somebody who we need.
Yeah.
So Glenn, I'm putting you in charge of starting that short list of us women that are looking for real boards to be part of.
Yeah, Wendy's right. Most positions are filled through personal referrals, not through some of these recruiting companies. So she's absolutely right. Your network is extremely important.
And Glenn, you must know a lot of people, so no pressure, but we're looking toward you.
I think Glenn knows like everybody, don't you?
That's come on, Annette.
That's what I'm thinking. Glenn,
Well,
do you
everybody you don't know, Glenn?
No. Well, the fact that I know both of you, I feel honored. But look, I'll take that on, Wendy.
All
but
right.
you know, if there's one thing I've learned about higher education in the last 90 days, that the pipeline from higher ed institution to employer is a lot easier than we think. Unfortunately, standardization has gotten in the way of creating a supply chain for talent pipeline that is very much outdated. So I'll make sure that we get this back on track.
Okay, good. We'll be keeping our eye on you, Glenn.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. And Wendy actually is going to be a speaker at the virtual summit as well in October. Terry Fontenot, I know you've got a question for Annette. Can you please go live? There you are.
Sure. Yep. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay. Well, first of all, Annette, I've really enjoyed the listening to you for the last few minutes and agree with everything you're saying. I think that you're right about having to be asked, but you also have to be prepared. And you also have to make sure that people know that you're available to be asked. That's certainly been my experience. So, and the other thing that I've learned, because I've kind of made a second career about serving on boards, because governance and strategy is what I'm interested in now that I'm no longer a sitting CEO, is that, you know, it is still somewhat a good old boys network. So become friends with the good old boys and network that way. So, you know,
that may be the wisest words I've ever heard, Terry.
Tell them you want to be, that you want them to mentor you, and they're happy to do it and sponsor you. And I'm thinking back, and I think so many of the board appointments that I've gotten, both not-for-profit as well as for-profit, have come through men who have been willing to sponsor me. So, you know, but I also tried to make sure through education and serving on a variety of boards, starting with the local American Heart Association chapter and then getting into some of the national not-for-profit boards. A lot of people think, well, if I want to be on the for-profit side, then I don't need to fool with the not-for-profit. And that's just, that is not true. Boards, and particularly in healthcare, I have found that, you know, hospitals are not these little community not-for-profit organizations. They're extremely complex. They're billion-dollar organizations. And I think the other thing that women need to do is make sure, or boards need to do, is make sure that they understand the value proposition for having diversity and inclusion. And we're talking about women, but that goes for ethnic, age, occupation, a lot of different things. There's been a lot of studies done by McKinsey for the last several years, and Catalyst, that have shown that profitability of for-profit organizations grows 30 to 40% when they add women to the male, pale, and stale boards that they historically had. So
well, Terry,
I can say those kind of things now because I'm kind of self-employed or unemployed or whatever you want to call it. I call it preferment, but I do what I prefer to do now. But but I agree with you. You've got to be asked, but you've also got to make sure that people know that you want to be asked and that you're prepared and that you're capable.
Thank you,
So
Terry.
I don't know if there's a question in there. Sorry about that. I just kind of.
No. Thank you, Terry. Well, you could see that, by the way, everyone that joined the session is still on. And but unfortunately, we're running out of time. And so, Annette, did you want to comment to Terry before we get to the last question and then we close?
No, Terry's absolutely right about being prepared. You know, you don't just all of a sudden arrive at a day and say, oh, I want to be on a corporate board when you haven't done, there's skill development to that. But, there's several groups I'm involved with, like with modern healthcare. There's many, many women who want to be on boards. And still in the last couple of years, and even California has a law about women on the boards, there's still not enough women on boards. And there are many, many qualified women. So that, I think that was my point. It's like, hopefully some of the more recent activities to push more equity, will include women and minorities, because a diverse board is a stronger board, just like a diverse workforce is. And they're like the last bastion. Women have made tremendous progress into the executive suite, but not as much on the board level.
So Annette, I want to make sure before we get to the last question, because I'm not sure people really know what it is that you're doing right now as president of City of Hope, Orange County. Can you give everybody a sense of what you've got going on and talk about the future of cancer care? Can you give them an overview of what you've been tasked with as president?
Sure, thank you. Well, if you're not familiar with Southern California, City of Hope right now sits in Los Angeles, and we have about 125 acres there. We're a NCI Cancer Center. We have 2 research centers. We have cell production capabilities. We have 700 clinical trials going on. We have 600 scientists and researchers. We have 400 doctors who are focused on cancer. Orange County is about 60 miles away. And many of you might have heard of Orange County. We had a stupid TV show after us at one point in time. But anyway, it's a beautiful place. It's a very nice place to live. We have tremendous resources, but yet 20% of the people in our county leave for highly specialized cancer care. So City of Hope is responding to that call, and we are building a second campus in Orange County. It's going to be in Irvine. And right now we're just completing the development of a 200,000 square foot cancer center, and also Orange County's only specialty cancer hospital. So we'll begin construction any day. And we want to make sure that the people of Orange County don't have to drive for hours to get that kind of specialty cancer care that City of Hope is known for. So that's my charge, that's my privilege. And I feel very blessed to be part of this effort.
Well, thank you, Annette. And, I think I would hope that all of you that are on our guests today recognize that it's not just building from the inside out, it's building from the outside in. I mean, what Annette is doing is an enormous task at hand. And talk about strategy. You're having to mobilize all of the communities that lie within Orange County. So thank you so much for what you're doing, Annette. And in fact, I'm going to leave you with this last question. You may recall that Laura submitted a chat question, and I asked her if she can get back on because I wanted her to know that she spoke with you, Annette. You see, Laura is early in career, Annette, and she's going places. And, she sees all the barriers that people from perhaps our generation have had. And she wants to learn how to navigate around it. So, Laura, you'll have the last question because we need to let Annette go, or else I'm going to get in trouble. So, Laura, if you can get on the mic live, please, and enjoy your conversation with Annette.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Annette, for taking my question. I guess my big question is, what advice do you have for an up-and-coming and aspiring leader?
Well, I would say that, just go for it. I think the times have changed, particularly for women, that you have a lot of opportunity, and the hesitation will be your greatest enemy. If you think you can do it, try it. Again, I'll say that I said before, everybody always thinks failure is way worse than it is. You always learn things no matter what you do. But if people understand that you're willing to grab it and try it and that you're brave, they're going to give you opportunities, because most people aren't. So Laura, if you want to be a great leader, just go for it. Take that ring, take your seat at the table. Don't wait for the invitation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Well, Annette's very welcome. She's
Well, thank you, Laura. Laura, I always get so excited when I hear younger people talk about the things they want to do, because they have such a perspective. And compared to like when I came into the field, the number of things that were open and the potential of what you want to do today, there's so many things to do and so many really good things to do. So just go for it. And you know what you think you're going to do for the first 20 years is going to be way different than the next 20.
Yeah. So just so you know, Annette, she's an early and aspiring leader from the healthcare industry.
Oh, it's a great industry.
So Annette, if you can perhaps shed light on some closing comments. I mean, there's so much that I think all of us can take away from your wisdom, and we're so grateful for what you've shared. But, you know, let's face it, 2020's been tough. What can you, what words can you share to help us propel forward? I mean, one thing that I'm walking away with is that I got to run right through the wall, and it doesn't matter how thick it is or tall it is. I got to go for it. But what else can you leave us with?
You know, I think as we in our careers aspire to these great things and doing worthy things and doing important work, don't lose sight of what grounds you, because at the end of the day, if you don't come home to something that really grounds you, whether it's your family or you know, your husband, your kids, your spouse, whatever, that don't lose those anchors in your life, because all the rest of it won't mean anything if you don't have those anchors. Those anchors are what buoy you in the storm. Those anchors are what continues to float your boat. So, you know, I sometimes tell young women when I meet with them, the most important thing you're ever going to do is to pick your spouse, because that's the person who's going to ride those waves with you. And I really believe that. But just in general, the anchors, Glenn, and this year probably has emphasized that so much more, that the people you surround yourself with have such an impact on your life, and you want to spend time with them. You want to be with them. Terrible this year, not being able to, whether it's your parents or your sisters or your brothers or even your colleagues, not having physical presence has been trying. So just really appreciate the people in your life and keep them close.
That's a beautiful way to end this session, Annette. And I personally can't thank you enough for joining us. I feel like every time you and I have a conversation, it kind of gets the best of us, meaning we kind of go with the flow and we lose a sense of kind of time. But I think what this has all made us recognize today is that, you know, as leaders, we have a choice, and you could either be part of the problem or you could be part of the solution. And we're at a pivotal time now in modern US history. And, you know, leadership certainly isn't a title anymore. It's the biggest responsibility that one can have, because in the age of personalization, it's not just you're not just responsible for being self-directed for your own behaviors. You have to be open-minded enough to not only see behaviors in other people that may take us down the wrong path, but yet also recognize those that perhaps can take us down the right path. So it's been extraordinary listening to you today, Annette. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great. And it's always a pleasure speaking with you, but all the people on the phone, it was great to talk to all of you too. And Jack, give my love to Patty.
And by the way, it said just a few things to let you go. Thank you, Annette. Boy, they keep coming in for your inspiration, and thank you for your closing comments. Family is so important. I believe my two boys have helped me be the leader that I am today. Thank you. What a great session. As one of Annette's direct reports, I can tell you that she walks the talk. What a great way to end. Annette, God bless you. You have a great rest of your day. And for our guests, remember that in the age of personalization, you must see things that others don't, do what others won't, and keep pushing when prudence says quit. Have a great rest of your day.